We welcome you to the SeatGeek Eagles pregame show. Here's the Eagles are taking on the 2-6 Jacksonville Jaguars this afternoon at Lincoln Financial Field. It's the return of Doug Pederson. It's the return of the Kelly Green uniforms, and it's the return of LaShawn McCoy, who is getting inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame. The Eagles haven't been home in a while, but they are riding a 3-game winning streak, looking to extend that to 4 today. Sam, how are we?
Doing good. Like you said, Eagles are on a 3-game winning streak, which feels great. Hoping that they can take it to the Jags today and extend it to a 4-game winning streak and kind of keep the good vibes rolling a little bit.
Oh, they should. I mean, they did have Robert De Niro in the lots today, so that can't disappoint with a legend in the house today. All right. Eagles rocking the Kelly Greens today. As mentioned, they're 2-0 in the Kelly Greens. The helmet, the uniforms, everything is back today. This game was supposed to be at 8 o'clock for Sunday night, but it got moved up to 4 o'clock. We'll get into that decision a little bit later. But, yeah, it's always fun when they're rocking the Kelly Greens. They are beautiful.
Yeah, it's so nice. As you can see behind me, I got my Kelly Green Jason Kelsey jersey out. It's really exciting, obviously, with them bringing them back last year. Finally, it's something that everyone's been asking for a long time, and they delivered as well as they could have. I mean, the jersey looks amazing. It's going to look great out there on the field. I'm excited to see some of the new guys that have never worn the uniform before. Saquon, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, some of the rookies. I know the Eagles posted a teaser of Coop and Quinyon in the jerseys, but I'm excited to see Saquon in it, and I think it'll be good because even though it's not the Sunday night football, you're still going to get a lot of the game today in the dark. So I think it'll look good with the Kelly Greens on, and so glad they brought them back. And it's definitely going to be fun for them to wear them for many, many, many years to come because I doubt they're ever going to go away now with how well the release went last year.
Yeah, I mean, there was tailgates outside of the store when they were released, so a lot of hype around them. What are your thoughts? Should they make them the permanent jerseys? A lot of people want them back as like the normal home jersey rather than the midnight green, or just have them as the alternate, or should they go all the way back and just bring back and consolidate the Kelly Green uniforms?
I mean, I would love if they brought him back. I mean, the Jets kind of did a little retro rebranding this year where they brought back their old school uniforms as their current uniforms. I mean, I would love it. I think a lot of people would love it, but I doubt they're really going to do it because Jeffrey Lurie, his creation is the midnight green. But I mean, I would love it. I would love to see them eventually get the white version of the jersey back, the white with the Kelly Green numbers. That would be pretty cool. But I don't think they're ever going to do it. I think they're going to stick with the midnight and then keep the 2-game a year Kelly Green alternates now.
Yeah, I agree with that. I do think that the white Kelly Greens are superior to the normal Kelly Greens, because the white Kelly Greens is actually what they wore at home back in the day. So if you really want the home uniform, you should wear the white. But we want to get technical. But anyway, another good thing with today, LaShawn McCoy is being inducted into the Eagles Hall of Fame. Long time coming for maybe the best running back in Eagles history. I mean, you got to watch Shady. I didn't really get to watch him, but, great Eagle.
Yeah, I mean, Shady was definitely my favorite player of that era of the Eagles. I loved him. There's a picture of me. I just remembered this picture as we were talking about him. I should have sent it to you. So that way we could have had it for this portion. But it's me in a Kelly Green Shady jersey for class picture day in 5th grade. The whole school is, you go around and they take a picture of the whole class, and there I am in my Kelly Green Shady jersey. So I loved him, and he's one of those players and one of those things in sports where you always remember where you were when it happened. I'll always remember where I was when they traded for him. I was in my room, and I saw online on ESPN that the Eagles had traded him to the Buffalo Bills. It was getting late at night, and I ran into my brother's room to tell him, and we couldn't believe it. It was just one of those things where you trade away such a great player like that for somebody at the time, Kiko Alonso, that just about nobody had ever heard of. It's one of those things that Chip Kelly did that just made everyone hate him. And obviously him and Deshaun Jackson leaving that same year was just devastating to a lot of Eagles fans. But it's really good to see that LeSean McCoy doesn't hold that against the Eagles organization, because a lot of people might hold that against the organization. And I'm glad that he and the organization have worked things out and that he's back, because like you said, I mean, if he's not the best running back in franchise history, I know his numbers say so, as he's the Eagles' leading rusher all time, but he's right up there with those guys like B. West and some of the ones from the past. So it's really good to see him finally getting into the Eagles Hall of Fame. He definitely deserves it. And yeah, it's great to see him back, and it'll be a really good ceremony for him at halftime today.
It sure will. I think there's a guy that's wearing 26 today that maybe one day could dethrone LeSean McCoy as the greatest running back in Eagles history. But he's got a few years to get there, but he's certainly on the track so far. And speaking of, current Eagles, let's go back to last week. Oh my goodness, what a game for the Eagles in Cincinnati. A dominant win over not the numbers don't look great for the Bengals, but they are a good team out there. I mean, when was the last time the Eagles had a game so dominant on all sides of the ball? I mean, my immediate thing, I look back at the Buffalo game last year, but the defense didn't play well. I look back at the Miami game, but the Eagles were tied in that game. I look back, I think I'm going all the way back to the NFC Championship game for the last time they had that dominant of a win against a pretty good team.
Yeah, and what's crazy, I think, Miami game, you mentioned that one, but if you go back to 22, I mean, the NFC Championship game, the offense struggled a lot early in that game until Hassan Reddick went crazy and hurt two of the 49ers quarterbacks, and they had no offense, and we kind of rolled from there. But in the beginning of that game, the Eagles offense was not really humming, which is kind of funny because it was the same thing for this last game against the Bengals. So, NFC Championship game, that playoff game against the Giants come to mind, where they just blew the doors off the Giants. I mean, it was definitely the best half of football they've played since 2022. It was a great win. It's definitely super encouraging to see. I think this team is definitely starting to shake off some of the demons of the collapse of last year. Obviously we still need to see them finish out the season strong, but at this point, it seems like they've kind of put that into the past. And I think us as fans can kind of see that as the past. I know it's who we're going to talk about next, but it was definitely Jalen's best game since that 2022 season.
Yeah, it sure was. Let's dive into Jalen's numbers. 16 for 20, 236 yards, had a touchdown, 3 straight games, 0 turnovers. Hurts' pass rating for the season is now 98.6, the 9th highest in the NFL. His 69% completion percentage also ranks 6th in all of the NFL. I mean, last week was the best Hurts we've seen since definitely 2022. Maybe a little smidgen in 23 where he was able to take down Mahomes, Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, Dak Prescott, that little run that the Eagles had going in their beginning of the season. But, I mean, that was great stuff, what we saw from Hurts last week. He didn't get too big. He didn't push things. He didn't rush things. He let things come to him. And, I mean, only 20 passes, but he was great.
Yeah, it was awesome to see. I mean, that second half was just about as good as football as he's played in his career, really. I mean, you go back to 22, obviously he had a lot of great games, but in terms of the 3 facets of the game, and, because he does play a big factor in controlling the Eagles running game and then his own running game and then passing the ball. I mean, he was great in just all 3 aspects of the game. And it's definitely something that is encouraging going forward. A lot of people, myself included, have been very critical of Jalen over the last year and a half. And, it's very encouraging to see that player that we saw in 2022 is still in there. Whether or not we'll see it every week, whether or not we have to wait, another year and a half to see it again, remains to be seen. I don't think that that's the case. I think that he can grow and kind of keep the momentum going from this game. But just to be able to have that kind of release, that player that we saw a few years ago, is still there. And I think, a big part of it has been the Eagles coaching staff's idea and offensive philosophy coming out of the break, that they're going to be a running football team and they're going to limit the times that Jalen throws. And, a lot of people will see that as a knock on Jalen, but it's just what's best for the team. Jalen I don't believe is a guy that needs to throw the ball 35, 45 times for you to win, and that's what the Eagles offensive coaching staff, I think, realized, especially with the way he was turning the ball over early in the season. That is a two-way street. I think the coaching staff has done a good job of putting him in better situations to succeed in that area. And obviously the player, Jalen, has done an amazing job of keeping the ball out of harm's way. I think, over those last 3 games, there's only one play, and it was last week where the Kenny Gainwell throw where it was like, oh my God, what is he doing? What was that decision? But that's only one play over 3 weeks. Quarterbacks are going to turn the ball over. They're going to throw interceptions. And over the last 3 weeks, he hasn't turned the ball over at all, which has been great. He's only thrown the ball, I think it was like 59 times over 3 games at just about 20 a game. So there hasn't been as many opportunities for him to turn the ball over, but he has been way smarter with the football, protecting it more in the pocket as well. It's hard not to be encouraged by what we saw last week. I'm not going to sit up here and say that just because he played one great half of football that he's completely back to the player that we signed for a $250 million contract. I need to see it multiple times, and I think we all need to see it multiple times before we can kind of say that player is back. But like I said, it's great to know that player is still in there, and hopefully with the way that the Eagles offense has been running, where they have gone back to being a run-first offense, pass second, they can kind of keep this train rolling. And, I said it last week on our pregame show that I thought that the Eagles had found that new philosophy of running the ball, letting Jalen make a few special plays a game, and then, playing some good defense as their philosophy going forward. And that's what we saw last week, and hopefully it continues.
It sure is, and it sounds like it was some of the players that were asking the coaching staff for this new philosophy. Nick Sirianni said this week that he has listened to Lane Johnson about running the ball more since the bye, and he has listened to Hurts about playing under center more. So it sounds like Nick is listening to his guys, or did Sirianni just read your story that you published a few weeks ago?
Yeah, I think it was such a big talking point throughout the whole city the last few weeks in the beginning of the season of throwing the ball over the middle of the field, putting the quarterback under center, that kind of thing. And when the numbers are so drastic, it's hard for people to not kind of catch on to that. And the players, I'm sure, catch on to it as well. And I think it's encouraging that Nick said the players went to him and said that they want to do these things more. And one of the big things is what that was talked about, of why they weren't throwing the ball over the middle of the field and why they weren't going under center, which, by the way, I still think they need to do more of and keep expanding on that. But at least they're starting to integrate that more, is because they didn't believe that it was putting Jalen in the best areas to succeed. They're not going to put Jalen in situations that make him uncomfortable. And I think that it's a big thing that if Jalen went to Nick Sirianni and said, hey, I'm ready to go under center, let's start putting this into the offense more, that's a big step for him because he might be uncomfortable with it. I believe, that's a reason why they weren't doing it is because he is uncomfortable with it. If you just look back to Oklahoma and all his years in the NFL, he's never really done it. So I think him going and saying, hey, I want to add this in. I want to put myself in uncomfortable situations to try to grow himself and to help the team out, I think is a really big step. And, of course, Nick is always going to give all the guys credit, and he's not going to take any credit. And then if there's blame to be had, he's going to take that on himself. We've seen that a ton of times in the past with, players making their own play calls and Nick taking the blame for it, or coaches making mistakes and Nick taking the blame for it. Or if coaches or players make great plays, Nick always is going to give them the credit. But I do believe him that these guys came to him. I think it's a big step. Like I said, for Jalen to be willing to put himself in some uncomfortable situations is definitely something that we need to see. And it's only going to help him grow as a player because the Eagles are a better team when they're running out of multiple sets, multiple formations. And for him to be able to have those going forward and have that experience in it in games is going to be massive. With the under the center thing, I still think they need to throw the ball out of under the center more. They've barely done that. Most of their plays under center have been running the ball. But I think they'll eventually add that wrinkle in. And, it's great for what the team can be going forward.
And going forward, it'll also certainly help, with their defense on the other side of the ball. We've seen a rejuvenized offense. Both receivers are in. Devontae Smith also, by the way, after having one reception for -2 yards in New York, came back last week in Cincinnati and had himself a pretty good game, a 46-yard touchdown reception included in there on an absolutely perfect pass by Jalen Hurts. But Another big reason they won last week was because of their defense. After the opening touchdown drive where the Bengals stomped down the field for 10 plus minutes, they just allowed 10 points and 210 yards after that. They limited Jamar Chase just to 11 targets and 54 yards, which did hurt my fantasy team. But I'll take the Eagles dub over it. Over the last 3 weeks, the Eagles defense has held the Browns, Giants, and Bengals to 29 points, 640 net yards, and 3.87 yards per play. Yes, the Browns and the Giants. Not much there. But the Bengals, that's pretty impressive, and that's really putting the Eagles defense on the map because, I mean, if I'm not an Eagles fan, let's say Dallas is out there putting up monster numbers against the Browns and the Giants and be like, oh, whatever. But if they do it against the Bengals, that opens my eyes a little bit, and the Eagles defense certainly opened up some eyes last week.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you look back this whole season, really, besides the Tampa game, the Eagles defense has been pretty good. I mean, you look back to the Green Bay game, obviously Green Bay put up a lot of points, but in the beginning of that game, the Eagles were turning the ball over like crazy. Jalen had the interception, then the bad snap, and it put them in some really bad areas on the field, and they were able to limit the damage. And then the Eagles offense was able to get things going in that second half to eventually win the game. And they don't win that game if the defense doesn't make some key stops early. And then, going through the Saints game, the Saints put up like 90-something points in their first 2 games. The Eagles defense really held them down. And then obviously the Buccaneers game, one bad game. It is what it is. There was a lot of factors that went into that one. But for the most part, they've been really good. And I think, Vic Fangio has done a really good job coming in, putting players, I think, in a little bit better positions to succeed. You're starting to see that a little bit with the turnovers the last week, because that was something that there's been a lot of drop turnovers. One of the big things that was made was that the Eagles defense doesn't have a ton of turnovers, but there's been a lot of plays to be made that they just hadn't been making. And last week they were making those plays. And I think, it's just been great. I think going forward, the trade deadline is on Tuesday. I think the Eagles still need to add in an edge rusher spot. Some of these guys are still struggling. Some people are coming on. Nolan Smith has been coming on over the last few weeks. Josh Sweat has played pretty well. Bryce Huff has looked a little bit better, but I still think adding a pass rusher would be probably the best way to impact this defense. But you look at the back seven, I mean, these linebackers have been playing really well. Nakobe Dean has been playing really well. Zach Vaughn, obviously, as well. And then you look at these guys in the secondary. I mean, Quinyon Mitchell, you talked about the stats from Jamar Chase. A lot of that was with Darius Slay out of the game. Quinyon Mitchell has just been an absolute stud so far this season. He needs to get a pick. He's dropped a few of them. He dropped one last week. But, I mean, he's just been fantastic. So, yeah, excuse me. I think this defense has been a little bit underrated. And I think after the Bengals game beating a really good quarterback, we can finally start to look at them as, okay, they're playing really well, and we might just have a good defense on our hands.
I think we do have a pretty good defense, and those picks will start to be caught, hopefully. I mean, if I had $1 for every time the Eagles almost had an interception, I would have, a good amount of money. I'd be able to buy something at some fast food restaurant. I'm sure I'd have.
You'd at least have like $6 from Quinyon alone.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it's at least $1 or $2 per week. So definitely, I'm at like $8 already. But another guy, you mentioned Quinyon. I mean, Cooper DeJean is just getting better every single week. He had the big 4th-and-1 stop of on Jamar Chase last week, which kind of turned the game the Eagles' way. He had a pretty dominant attack. I mean, this is going to go under the radar, but Bengals were inside the 5-yard line. Burrow threw a ball towards far side, and it was to Trent Irwin, and Cooper DeJean was right there, kind of bounced off of a guy and then went to him. You see a lot of opposing players against the Eagles break a tackle on the edge, but DeJean was able to get him by the neck and bring him down. Wasn't able to break tackle. I believe the Bengals got in the end zone right after that, but still a big tackle by DeJean there, but kind of difference.
I think that was actually the drive where Slay broke it up the next play in the end zone, and they had to settle for a field goal.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, that's right. They did get the field goal there. Yeah, that's right. But, I mean, you just see a lot of guys against the Eagles break through that tackle. Not Cooper DeJean. And, I mean, that big stop on Jamar Chase as well. He's just getting better every single week, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch. And he was a super exciting player in college, kind of playing that hybrid role. And coming into this year, last year, he was injured his last year in college. He's had a slow start to his career with the Eagles. First couple of games, he didn't really get to play because he was hurt in training camp. So that's obviously something that we need him to kind of work through is staying healthy, because that's going to be the biggest worry for him. But I mean, you look at this kid's just basketball highlight tapes in high school, and you can just see how athletic he is, dunking over people. And I think that translates on the NFL field. He's not the biggest kid, but he is willing to hit, which I think is the biggest thing. You talked about it, about how great of a tackler he's been. And a lot of tackling is just willingness to put your body out there. I mean, that play where he obviously tackled Jamar Chase behind the line of scrimmage on that fourth down might have just been the biggest play of the game, because the game was tied at that point. Eagles get the ball in plus territory, go on to score. It was such a huge momentum shift there. It's as good as a turnover. And this defense is kind of transformed. I mean, coming out of the bye, him being inserted into the starting lineup, and then the defense playing really well out of the bye, it all comes together at the same time. He had a fantastic play. I saw a great breakdown on Twitter on his dropped interception last week about how he was very smart, great football IQ of what defense he was playing. He realized that he needed to get back. He got back and he jumped the route and he almost had it. I'm not going to say he's Malcolm Jenkins, but they're kind of playing him in that Malcolm Jenkins hybrid role right now, where sometimes Malcolm would come up to the line of scrimmage like that. But the Eagles are fortunate enough to have two safeties that are playing pretty well right now, so they're able to leave them back. So that was the difference between the Malcolm and him comparison. But when Malcolm was up in the line of scrimmage, he had those cornerback coverage abilities, and Cooper definitely has that. There was a lot of talk about him coming out of the draft that, part of the reason that he fell is that a lot of teams didn't want to draft a slot cornerback in the first round. And I get that, but we're seeing exactly why he's super valuable. And I mean, the Eagles got a steal in the draft, it looks like. And I'm really excited to see how he develops. And I mean, looks like Howie Roseman going cornerback, first two picks. It's out of character for him. They hadn't done cornerback in the first round, cornerback in the second round since Sidney Jones there with that second round pick. So it was good to see him go back to the well with that. And while it was out of character, it seemed like he got some really good players. And the Eagles secondary is in some good hands for the future, because they're really deep with a lot of young talent there.
They sure are. That's what you like to see. Something else, you don't like to ever see an injury. But if I'm just looked over into the Dallas game, and Cooper Rush has replaced Dak Prescott, who is done for the day with a hamstring injury. Wow. Dak Prescott hamstring injury for the Dallas Cowboys. We'll get more on that later.
Well, that's big. We play Dallas next week, so that could be a big. If he's out for a few weeks, I mean, we've seen how the hamstrings have affected Jordan Mailata, AJ Brown, missing multiple games. Obviously Dak's going to do everything he can to get back on the field for a desperation game, most likely against the Eagles. But that's definitely something to monitor throughout the next week.
Yeah, I feel like Dallas may play better with Cooper Rush stuff. So we'll see. Dak isn't having the best year. You mentioned the trade deadline earlier. Do you want to quickly touch on that? You said pass rushers. Is there any specifics you're looking for, and anyone you would like to there's a guy you would like to maybe move?
So I don't know if I'd like to move anyone on the team currently. I think that they're pretty much good with that. I mean, edge rusher, I feel like is the easiest spot to trade for. One, because it's the biggest position of need. And two, it's not a spot where there's like true starters. While there are people who start the game and play a lot of snaps, it's easy to rotate a guy in and out of there and take a few snaps away from one player and give it to another one. In terms of players, I mean, it's kind of hard. I've heard some people mention trying to snag Jadeveon Clowney off the Panthers. There's Smith on the Browns that a lot of people are looking at as well. He's had 4 sacks this year, has had a good career. Obviously all Eagles fans want Myles Garrett, or they want Max Crosby, which is obviously most likely not going to happen. But I think there are a few players who can come out there and make an impact. I don't think Howie's going to trade for a star level player. I think he's going to try to get another kind of role player in here, probably another Josh Sweat type, just to have a little bit more of a depth on the rotation. And then you never know what Howie's going to do. I wish that they waited to trade for a wide receiver instead of pulling the trigger on Jahan Dotson so early, as we've seen a lot of very good wide receivers go for less than we got Dotson for. But at the time it was a need, and Dotson still has control, which a lot of these wide receivers don't. So we'll see how that goes. I think they might add O-line depth just because, maybe a backup lineman here or there because of the way these offensive linemen have been kind of dropping like flies this season. God forbid anything happens to one of our backups, we're going to be really thin there. But I think pass rusher is probably going to be the spot they target. I mean, Howie's track record at trade deadline acquisitions have not been great, but that doesn't mean I don't want him to keep swinging. I think, going into this game, we expect the Eagles to win. We expect the Eagles to be 6-2. It's hard not to add to a team that's 6-2 with all this talent, especially on the offensive side and how well the defense is playing. I think a lot of people would be upset if they don't add to this team, and I expect some type of move before Tuesday.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit of O-line depth. Well, they certainly got some with Fred Johnson last week. When I quickly touch on him, I mean, Trey Hendrickson, who Johnson was going against, 7 sacks this year already for Hendrickson. He was kept silent last week. You didn't see Trey Hendrickson's name at all, and thanks to big Fred Johnson for stepping up with Mylon out.
It's amazing. The Eagles are just able to plug and play these guys. Fred Johnson had a bad week when he played against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but ever since then, stepping in for Jordan, he has done a great job. And he's got another big test this week. You got Josh Hines Allen, and you got Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker will probably be up against him a lot of the time, former number 1 overall pick, and he's having a great year. But I mean, Fred Johnson played great last week, and then you see it really when these guys come in, they just plug and play. I mean, Tyler Steen, everyone talks about Fred Johnson, but nobody talks about how well Tyler Steen played last week as well in replacement of Mekhi Becton. So, yeah, I mean, Stoutland University keeps pumping out some great players, and they're just able to plug and play just about everybody. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, Stoutland is the man, and he always has been. All right, let's turn our heads towards today's game, which is starting in just about a half an hour, and it's featuring the return of Eagles Super Bowl head coach Doug Pederson. The man has a statue outside of Lincoln Financial Field. He says he's never seen it. Maybe you got a chance to stop by it this week. Anyway, the Jaguars are 2-6. They haven't gotten much out of Trevor Lawrence. Their defense is pretty brutal. Will Pederson be fired after this season for the second time in his career?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the writings on the wall for Doug that this will be his last year in Jacksonville. They gave Trevor Lawrence a massive contract in the offseason. And obviously, a lot of people think Trevor Lawrence has a lot of talent. And unfortunately, Doug has not been able to utilize that to the best of, I guess, Trevor's abilities. Sometimes it's the head coach, sometimes it's the quarterback. But that they're going to give Trevor Lawrence a chance to try to succeed with somebody else. Press Taylor, their offensive coordinator, was here in Philadelphia and was a big reason why Doug got fired because the Eagles wanted to bring in new coaches, and Doug was fighting to keep Press Taylor, and now he's with Jacksonville, and they're doing terrible again. And it's a shame because I do think Doug obviously is a good head coach, but it's just been a bad year in Jacksonville. They had one playoff appearance his first year where they had one of the worst playoff losses in the NFL history when they blew a massive lead at halftime to the Chargers. Last year, just barely missed the playoffs, and then this year, obviously, really struggling. So I think, the writing is on the wall that Doug is going to be out of there pretty soon, and I think this might be his last stop.
Yeah, it sure is. This could be his final game with Jacksonville, depending on how it goes. But an Eagles legend, like when you think about Eagles legends, like Doug Pederson has to come up, like all-time great head coaches for the Eagles. Dick Vermeil, Andy Reid, and I guess Doug Pederson.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously earlier talked about LaShawn McCoy going to the Eagles Hall of Fame today. Doug Pederson most certainly will go into the Eagles Hall of Fame someday soon, probably pretty soon after he unfortunately probably loses his job in Jacksonville, but he will most likely go into the Eagles Hall of Fame. Crazy. As you see behind me, I have the Doug Pederson jersey that he was a backup quarterback, turned starting quarterback for the Eagles, and then came back and was called the worst head coaching hire in the NFL, one of the most unqualified coaches in the NFL, and all this, and then turns it around, takes the 2017 Eagles to a great record, loses his MVP favorite quarterback, transforms the offense, wins with a backup quarterback, beats the GOAT in Tom Brady and the GOAT in Bill Belichick. Just an amazing head coach for the Eagles, just a great guy. Everything you hear about Doug is just how fantastic of a person he is. And like I said, he someday will be an Eagles Hall of Famer. You said it. He already has a statue outside of the stadium, which not many people have. He's someone who will live on forever as an Eagle great. And anytime he's back, it's great. And I think he'll be around a lot more often soon. And it's always good to see him back.
It sure is. Yeah, I think I don't know who else is going to want to hire Doug Pederson after this season unless things go wrong with Nick Sirianni the rest of the way. You may see, maybe you could see Dougie P back in an Eagles visor after this season. We'll see. I highly doubt it. All right, Hurts versus Trevor Lawrence. This game was flexed out of Sunday Night Football, and the game tonight kind of sucks. Colts Vikings brutal. Joe Flacco is starting for the Colts against Sam Darnold for the Minnesota Vikings. People will really want to see that matchup, but is Hurts Lawrence a real primetime matchup instead of that? I feel like people would have more interest in that.
Yeah, I mean, the game that really should have been flexed to Sunday Night Football is Packers-Lions. I mean, that's the game that everybody wants to watch. Joe Flacco, he's obviously, starting now for the Colts, had a great career, Super Bowl champ, but I don't know how many people are staying up late to watch his first start, or second start, I guess, with the Colts. Minnesota has been struggling a little bit lately, so if there was going to be flex for any game, you would think it would be Packers-Lions, but yeah, I mean, a few years ago, no one would have thought that Jalen Hurts would be a better NFL quarterback than Trevor Lawrence. And that's just been the fact of the last few years. Trevor Lawrence, number one overall pick a few years ago. Everyone knows he was in Clemson, won a couple of national championships coming out of the draft. He was the obvious number one overall pick. A lot of people compared him to the best, or said he was the best prospect to come out since Andrew Luck. And he just hasn't lived up to that so far. A lot of people are going to turn and say that Doug Pederson hasn't done a good enough job coaching him, or the Jaguars haven't put a good enough team around him. And while their defense is bad, they do have some good offensive weapons. And, they've lost a lot of close games this year. If you just look at Trevor Lawrence's numbers, they're not horrible. 63% completion percentage, 1,800 yards, 11 touchdowns, four interceptions, 94 rating. But he just hasn't been the player that everyone hyped him up to be. He got a massive contract extension during the offseason, which is pretty crazy because he hasn't really done anything. But Jacksonville is just so desperate to have anyone that they're going to, obviously extend him early with the fear of losing him and him going to another franchise and turning it around. So, yeah, it's definitely not a super primetime matchup. It's exciting, I guess, to see what Jalen's going to do against the Jaguars, because Lawrence is someone who is seen to have a lot of talent, and it's exciting to see our guy play better than a former number one overall pick. But in terms of why they flexed it out, I see why, just because the Jaguars have been really struggling, and not many people, the Trevor Lawrence effect of bringing in national viewers is just gone now.
Yeah, I would think more people would just have interest. I mean, at least you're getting a good uniform matchup. Jaguars got some fun colors. Eagles wearing the Kelly greens. So, I mean, I think that's a little better than, Flacco, Darnold, Vikings, Colts. But I don't know. Whatever. What are you expecting from Hurts against this Jaguars defense tonight?
Yeah, so it's interesting. The Jaguars defense is pretty bad. They're actually very good against the run. They're the 9th ranked run defense. They have some players there on that defensive line, but they're 30th or 31st against the pass. 31st against the pass. So I think my worry for this game is that the Eagles are going to go away from their game plan that they've had the last couple of weeks of run the ball 2-to-1 ratio with the pass. I'm okay with not a full 2-to-1 ratio, but I think it's been working so well, and I have a lot of faith that the Eagles can run the ball on just about everybody. I mean, Saquon Barkley, in my opinion, is the best running back in the NFL. Obviously, we talked about it with Fred Johnson and some of these guys. They get Mekhi Becton back. Obviously, besides Fred Johnson, everyone else is a starter. I think their offensive line can run the ball on anyone. So I don't want to really go away from it. My fear for this game is that they're going to go a little bit too pass happy, but I do expect Jalen to have another good game. He's been playing a lot better since the bye. I think they're going to still stick to more running than passing. I think they're going to try to take advantage of the deep ball with A.J. Brown against this really poor secondary. I don't know if he's going to have as good as a game as he did last week in terms of completion percentage, because I do think they're going to throw the ball a little bit more. Last week he was at about 80%, which is pretty unrealistic to expect every week. But I think they're going to have another good balance. I think that Jalen is going to have another good game, and it's going to be interesting to see how they use his legs this week, because they used it a lot last week. He looked very fast. He looked very good running the ball. So it'll be interesting to see if they do that again this week.
Should be interesting. He will also be missing his tight end once again. Dallas Goedert is out with a hamstring injury, but also Darius Slay is out for the Eagles tonight with a groin injury. Isaiah Rodgers will start in his place, and Isaiah Rodgers last week, oh my goodness, he had this insane play. He went up for it, tipped it in the air, and then C.J. Gardner-Johnson was right there, got the interception. It was one of the craziest plays I think I've ever seen. So I feel good with Rodgers there for Slay, but still, something to look at with, Slay out with the groin and Goddard out again.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying with that Rodgers play, it was so crazy that the announcers didn't even know it was intercepted. They didn't even realize that the ball was picked. It was an amazing play by Isaiah. He tipped it right there to CJ, and he talked a lot about how he knew that Gardner-Johnson was going to be right there. He trusted that Gardner-Johnson was going to be right there. That's why he tipped it. And I think that shows to the coaching staff. The defensive backs coach and Vic Fangio doing a great job of making sure that everyone knows not only their role, but the other players around them's role. And then they have a lot of trust in each other, that he knows and he trusts that CJ is where he needs to be and where he's supposed to be on that play. And I think, like you said, obviously, ever since that Tampa game, Slay has definitely turned his season around. He's been playing very well. He had a very good game starting off last week. He had that big play in the end zone before getting hurt. But I'm confident in Quinyon Mitchell. I'm confident in Cooper DeJean, and I'm confident in Isaiah Rodgers. Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis was questionable. I don't believe he's playing. Christian Kirk is definitely out. So they only have one wide receiver who really scares you today with Brian Thomas Jr. So obviously they're going to tailor a lot of their coverage to him. So I feel comfortable with that. But then with Goddard, I mean, it really is a shame because he is a very good player. But at this point, he just gets injured way too much. This is obviously a conversation we can have in the offseason, but I believe he is a free agent after the season, and I just don't know how you re-sign him at this point. He's going to want a decent amount of money. He's getting, surprisingly, I believe he's already like 30 years old. Every year he misses a bunch of games, and I just don't know how you can keep paying somebody like that when they can try to go out. I think they will address that in the draft this year, try to get a young tight end. And I mean, Green Calcaterra has been great stepping up. Somehow, some way, he keeps getting wide open. I don't know how, but Kellen Moore is scheming up these great plays for him to just be wide open, getting these big chunk plays. So, I think the Slay one obviously might impact it a little more just because it's the first game without him while Goddard's been out for a little while. But, obviously two of your best players, so it definitely hurts to have both of them out.
Sure does. All right, final point before we get into our essentials. The Eagles did not score in the first quarter again last week. Not totally their fault. They only had really like 3 minutes to have the ball in the entire game, in the entire quarter, I should say. Bengals took their time getting down the field scoring. Is this the week the Eagles snap the 8 or 9 week drought with no score in the first quarter? Will it happen today in the Kelly Greens? God, please let it happen.
So last week I said I'm not going to predict it's going to happen until I see it happen, but they did score on their first possession last week. So I feel confident enough to say that they will do it this week. I think that they will put some points on the board in the first quarter. maybe they'll get the ball first for the first time. It feels like in forever. It seems like the Eagles get the second half kickoff just about every game, which I'm happy with. It's a huge advantage, but maybe they'll lose the kickoff today or lose the coin toss today. And after scoring some points on their first drive last week, I think they're finally going to get it done this week, and we can all rejoice.
Yeah, this could be the link may come crashing down if the Eagles score a point in the first quarter. I'm waiting for it, man. Maybe the overalls will bring some luck for the Eagles to score in the first quarter. What a stupid narrative. All right, let's move on. Your notable matchups for today: 5-2 Eagles against the 2-6 Jaguars. What are the matchups?
Yeah, so I got two big ones. We talked about it with the Darius Slay injury, but it's Quinyon Mitchell versus Brian Thomas Jr. Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie wide receiver out of LSU, is having a great start to his career. He has 33 catches so far for 573 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's a stud. He was not one of the top wide receivers taken. His teammate, obviously we all know, we talked about him a few weeks ago with the Giants, Malik Neighbors, is having a great year. And Brian Thomas Jr. is having a great year as well. Some of the best wide receivers in the NFL, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Odell Beckham a few years ago, have all come out of LSU. So maybe just draft an LSU wide receiver in the first round if you want a good one. But he's going to have his hands full. I think that Q is going to be with him a lot of the day, especially because Christian Kirk and Gabe Davis, I believe Gabe Davis isn't playing, but Christian Kirk definitely is not. So I think that Q is going to have if Q has a good day like he did against Jamar Chase last week, I think the Eagles can have a lot of success on defense. And I got a prediction for you. Q finally gets his first pick today.
That's what you like to hear. All right.
My second one, real quick, I'll run through it. Fred Johnson versus Trayvon Walker. Trayvon Walker was the Jaguars' #1 overall pick just a few years ago out of Georgia. He's had a very slow start to his career, but he has finally found his stride and is showing the Jaguars fans why he was worthy of that #1 overall pick. He has 6.5 sacks so far this season, 1 forced fumble. Fred Johnson did a great job, like we talked about with Trey Hendrickson last week. He's got another tough task this week with Trayvon Walker. Hopefully he can keep the good vibes going and have another good week against Walker.
Yeah, I don't really know who Trayvon Walker has to convince to his fans because there aren't many Jaguar fans out there.
There's a few down here. You'd be surprised.
There's a few. All right, moving on. Anyway, I don't want to have any problems with Jaguars, the very few Jaguar fans that exist. But the SeatGeek Standout Stars. SeatGeek is the easiest and most efficient way to buy your tickets. Each seat is given a green, red, or yellow dot, indicating whether purchasing that ticket would be a good, bad, or fair deal. By using the code Philly Sports Report, you can save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. PHILLYSPORTSREPORT. Save $20 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Click the link in the description or the bio to save. Sam will be using his $20 off at SeatGeek to buy his Jaguar tickets because then he'll only have to spend $5. Anyway, Sam, who are your SeatGeek Standout Stars?
All right, so I'll go back to him. I predicted he's going to get his first pick today. He had a great game against Jamar Chase last week, and I think he's going to keep Brian Thomas Jr. in check today. That's Quinyon Mitchell. He's got his first game as cornerback #1 for this team, which will be a role that he will have for the future of his career. I think he steps up, has a big game today. And I'm also going A.J. Brown. I talked about it, but the Jaguars' defense is ranked 31st against the pass. I think the Eagles are going to hit a deep ball to A.J. Brown for a touchdown. It's probably the best part of Jalen's game is his deep ball. He's fantastic at throwing it deep. And if A.J. Brown gets one-on-one, it's just about over for that cornerback. I think A.J. Brown's going to have a big game today. And, those are my stars of the game.
All right, thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring the Gamblers RS locks of the game. The Eagles are -7, and the over-under is 47.5. I also just added something in there for you to place a bet on, so it's at the end of your list, but I hope you place it and then you donate some of the money that you win to me. So what are your locks?
Yeah, so the Eagles, like you said, 7-point favorites. That is obviously very big for just about any NFL game. But I do like the Eagles with the points here. This line was hovering around 7.5 for a long time. Moved to 7 just about today. but I still like the Eagles with the points. The over-under is, like you said, 47.5. I have this game going under. I do like the Eagles to score some points in this game, but I don't like the Jaguars to get into the 20s. We'll get in that with my prediction for the game. Jalen Hurts anytime touchdown. I mean, if you're not taking it at this point, it's just about free money just about every game. Obviously, now that I said that, it's not going to hit, so let's knock on wood there. But he had three rushing touchdowns last week. You got to try to ride it. Maybe even 2 touchdowns every time they get on that 1 yard line. They're giving it to him. And then A.J. Brown, I talked about him as a standout star. Anytime I have a standout star, I always like to back that up with a bet on them. His over-under is 80.5 yards. He went over that last week, even with Devontae Smith having a huge game. I think he gets a long touchdown. And then if you can bet it, Quinyon Mitchell interception or Quinyon Mitchell plus 4,000 for anytime touchdown. Put $1 on it. I mean, $5, $2. I may or may not have put $2 on it. Like I said, anytime I have a standout star, I like to back it with my bets, and I like that as well.
Yeah, I just added that to our agenda doc, the Q interception. So, I mean, if you hit, I think you may be Venmoing me like $5. So just putting that out there. All right, we both are doing the FOCO Fit Check today. It's not just for Sam, which you typically is, but we're both participating in it today. Real fans need the best gear. That's why FOCO makes the most legendary gear for the most legendary fans. Click on the link in the description or the bio to save 10% off any order of FOCO. And we need to thank FOCO very much because they sent Sam and I both some beautiful Kelly green overall. Sam has been wearing his, I think what week did you wear yours?
I wore mine the first week of the bye, I believe. So the Browns game, yeah.
The Eagles did win that game. It wasn't very convincingly, but
good
they
luck
did win
overall.
that game. Yeah. So I'm wearing my overalls when I wear them. I'm 0-3 wearing overalls, but this is my first time I'm wearing Eagles overalls. Hope we bring some luck. The new, I think they call it the historic print. Got a bunch of different logos on here, so make sure you go get yours at FOCO. Click the link in the description or the bio to save 10% off any FOCO purchase. Thank you to them very much for sending us these overalls, and
Yes.
Well,
thank you very much to FOCO. These are awesome. Like I said before, these are the short version, the shortalls they call them, correct? And they're perfect for if you're down here in the hot weather. Obviously, not everyone is in the Philadelphia area where it's still 85 down here. So it's great to have these, and definitely excited to rock them for the Kelly Green return.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little chilly up here. Sunset, I think, is at 4:55 tonight.
Wow.
4:55. We turned the clocks back yesterday. It's like my least favorite day of the year because while I do gain an hour of sleep, I hate how when it gets dark early, it's like my least favorite thing ever. And 4:45 sunset today, I'm very not happy about it. But
yeah, this is a weird time of the year because I'll be watching an Eagles game that's in the dark while it's still light out here because sunset today here is 5:40. So I'll get a full just about 45 minutes of this game where I'm looking outside and it's light, but it's going to be dark in Philadelphia even though we're on the same coast. So it's a little bit weird for the viewing experience, but I think it'll make the Kelly Green pop even more when it's dark out there.
It sure will. You saw it on Sunday night against Miami last year, the Kelly Greens, and under the lights was pretty nice. All right, keys to the game, Sam. What do you got?
Yeah, so I got 2 big ones. The first one, I talked about it a lot when talking about Jalen, and I think the Eagles just need to really stick to their game plan they've had coming out of the bye. Sometimes, you see these teams where they just kind of look at the defense, and I want the Jaguars to make the Eagles throw the ball, not the Eagles to come out and plan to throw the ball. Even though they have the 9th-ranked rushing defense, I think we'll be able to run on them no matter what. Saquon Barkley, this offensive line, they'll impose their will, and we need to stick to the same game plan we've had. If that calls for a few more passes, that's fine, but I don't want to get up to the 35-45 kind of area. And then don't look ahead. This is just about as classic of a trap game as you can get. You got 2 division opponents coming up in Dallas and then Thursday night against Washington. Dallas, like you said, lost their quarterback today. We don't know how long he'll be out, but a lot of the players probably don't even know that. They're thinking about going to Dallas, and then we got Washington at home for most likely first place in the division. And then you got a bad team coming in here today. This is just about as classic of a trap game as it gets. But as Nick Sirianni said, don't drink the perfume, just smell it. We need to focus on today only. And hopefully they don't take this team or this game for granted. The Jaguars, even though they're 2-6, 4 of their losses have been within 5 points. So they play a lot of teams tough. And if we're not focused on today, if our mind's not there at any point, this is a game that the Jaguars can come in and steal. So we need to be focused on the game at hand, not looking ahead to the next few weeks.
Yeah, the Commanders just wrapped up the victory over the New York Giants. So they're now 7-2, 6-2. I don't
7-2.
7-2. I mean, if you told me I thought Washington would be second in the division. I did not think that was going to be good this year, but I did not predict 7-2 from the Commanders.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at their schedule, obviously they've already played the Giants twice, so that kind of plays into it. They've had some lucky wins, but last week, obviously, and then the Giants losing their kicker, the Giants should have beat them the first time around. I think we'll really see how good Washington is when we play them. I think we'll be a very good measuring stick for them, but it just shows that when you get a really good quarterback in there, it can turn your whole franchise around. And Washington has a really, really good quarterback.
They sure do. It looks like Josh Harris finally has done something right while owning a professional sports team. Anyway, moving on. Our game predictions today. Make sure you put your predictions in the chat. We'll look at them. All right, I'm going to start. I think the Eagles win big today. I don't think it's close at any point in this game. I think they score in the first quarter, and they do not look back. Eagles 30. Jaguars 13.
I like it. Yeah, I've been hesitant. I've said multiple times on this show, I've been hesitant to predict blowouts just because I need to see them do it against a good team. And the Eagles did it against a good team last week. I have them beating the Jaguars 27-17 today. Anytime you beat any team by 2 scores, I would consider that a blowout. I think the Jaguars are going to be fighting for their life a little bit. They're going to be fighting for Doug, in my opinion. So it might be a little bit close early, but I think it's going to be a lot of the same script that the Eagles games have kind of followed, where in the first half, things are close. Everyone's mad. Everyone's angry on Twitter. Jalen stinks. Nick Sirianni stinks. Who is this team? And in the second half, the Eagles come out. They figure it out, and they kind of blow them out in the second half there. So, yeah, 27-17 is my prediction.
Yeah, I hope the Eagles just get off to a hot start. We can kind of get comfy and cozy, get the hot chocolate up here.
That would be amazing.
And, enjoy a chill second half, which, we got last week. But other than that, haven't gotten in quite a long time. That's going to do it for us here on the SeatGeek Eagles pregame show. Thank you to SeatGeek. Thank you to Foco. Make sure to check out PhillySportsReports.com for the post-game recap from tomorrow for my after-day takeaways. Follow us on our social media. Thank you for watching. We'll be with you next week when the Eagles take on the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry World. Thank you, everybody. Go Birds!